There comes a moment in every nation's story when silence is no longer an option. Tonight, we face such a moment. For too long, the truth has been twisted, mocked, and drowned out by a storm of lies. For too long, those in power have mistaken deception for strength, cruelty for leadership, and division for patriotism. But let me be clear. Truth does not vanish when ignored, and history does not forget when leaders abandon their responsibility. We are here because the stakes demand nothing less than honesty, courage, and clarity. Donald Trump built his rise on noise, on the belief that if you speak loudly enough, long enough, and shamelessly enough, you can bend reality to your will. He believed that truth could be drowned out in a sea of insults, that justice could be delayed by chaos, that unity could be undone by fear. But what he never understood is that the American people carry a deeper wisdom, a wisdom rooted not in spectacle, but in experience. You can fool some for a season, you can distract many with slogans and outrage, but you cannot erase the heartbeat of a nation that knows what it stands for. When I look back at history, I see that this is not the first time America has been tested by those who sought to replace fact with fiction. We faced it when demagogues told workers to blame immigrants for their hardships instead of demanding fair wages. We faced it when segregationists tried to convince us that equality was dangerous, that justice would tear the country apart. Each time, the truth was ridiculed, resisted, and even silenced, but it never died. It endured because ordinary people, armed with nothing but conviction, chose to stand for what was right. And so, tonight, the truth must be spoken again. The office of the presidency is not a stage for self-promotion. It is not a tool for personal profit. It is not a license to divide one neighbor against another. The presidency is a sacred trust, handed from generation to generation, meant to safeguard freedom, to defend democracy, to lift up the most vulnerable among us. That trust was broken when Donald Trump chose himself over the people, when he decided that loyalty to him was more important than loyalty to the truth. But this message is not about one man alone. It is about us, all of us, all of us. Because the future of this nation does not rest on whether Trump speaks another lie tomorrow. It rests on whether we, the people, choose to believe in something stronger. It rests on whether we understand that democracy does not survive on autopilot. It requires vigilance. It requires sacrifice. It requires ordinary citizens who are willing to defend what is right, even when it is hard, even when it is unpopular. Think of the farmer who works through droughts and storms, believing that perseverance will feed his family and his community. Think of the teacher who stays late in a classroom with broken desks and outdated books, believing that her students deserve a chance to rise. Think of the soldier who salutes the flag, not because it is perfect, but because it represents a promise worth protecting. These men and women do not live in the spotlight, but their quiet courage is what holds the nation together. They remind us that greatness is not measured by how loudly you speak. It is measured by how faithfully you serve. Donald Trump has mistaken noise for power. He has mistaken fear for strength. And in doing so, he has underestimated the resilience of this nation. Because America does not belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the millions of voices. Sometimes quiet, often overlooked, but always determined to move forward together. It belongs to the mothers who demand safety for their children, to the workers who demand dignity, to the citizens who demand justice. That is where the real power lies. So tonight, we set the record straight. The truth will not be silenced, not by lies, not by division, not by fear. And history will judge us not by the volume of the noise around us, but by the strength of our response to it. This is not just about calling out what has gone wrong. It is about summoning the courage to make things right. And that brings us to the question of leadership. Because if truth is the foundation, then leadership is the weight that rests upon it. Leadership is what decides whether truth is honored or discarded, whether unity is pursued or betrayed. In the next part of this message, we will confront what real leadership demands and why Donald Trump has failed to meet that test. Leadership is not a crown you wear. It is a burden you carry. It is not measured by the applause you receive or the spotlight you occupy, but by the weight of responsibility you are willing to bear for those you serve. A true leader understands that when you step forward, you carry not only your own ambition, but the hopes, the fears, and the struggles of millions who depend on you. That is the sacred truth of leadership. And that is the truth Donald Trump has never embraced. Time and again, he treated leadership like a stage, a place to perform, to entertain, to divide. He believed the presidency was about making himself larger rather than lifting the nation higher. He measured success not by the progress of the people, but by the size of his crowds, the length of his headlines, the praise of his loyalists. But let me tell you something. History has never remembered leaders for the noise they made. It remembers them for the bridges they built, the sacrifices they made, the lives they touched. Think of Abraham Lincoln, who in a time of war carried the unbearable grief of a divided nation on his shoulders. He did not seek to inflame anger. He sought to heal a fractured people. Or Franklin Roosevelt, who faced economic despair and global conflict with words of steadiness and acts of resolve. Not because it was easy, but because millions of families needed him to stand strong. Leadership, at its core, is about being the first to step into the storm, the first to bear the burden, and the last to claim the credit. Donald Trump's leadership has been the opposite. He sought power without responsibility. He demanded loyalty without giving honesty. He used the presidency to inflame division, to sow mistrust, to turn neighbor against neighbor. And in doing so, he abandoned the most basic duty of the office, to safeguard not his own image, but the well-being of the people. A leader who refuses to serve is not a leader at all. He is merely an actor playing a role. And yet, the American people know the difference. They know leadership when they see it. Even in the quiet corners of this country where no cameras shine. They see it in the nurse who works back-to-back shifts, holding the hands of strangers in their darkest hour. They see it in the firefighter who runs toward flames while others flee. They see it in the parent working 2 jobs, sacrificing so their child can dream bigger dreams. These are leaders in the truest sense, men and women who understand that responsibility is not a burden to avoid, but a duty to embrace. That is what makes Trump's failure so profound. Because the presidency demands the humility to listen, the wisdom to unite, the discipline to put the nation before yourself. This demands the recognition that your words can either lift people up or tear them down, that your choices ripple through the lives of millions you may never meet. A careless word can sow chaos. A selfish decision can cost lives. That is the weight of leadership. And it is a weight too heavy for those who seek only to serve themselves. We must not forget this truth as we move forward. For if leadership is left in the hands of those who mistake ego for vision, we will stumble. But if leadership is entrusted to those who understand service, sacrifice, and responsibility, then we will rise. And we will rise not because one man claims to make America great, but because the people themselves, bound together in hope, demand greatness from each other. So tonight, let us recognize what has been lost under Trump's version of leadership and what must be reclaimed. We cannot afford leaders who shrink from truth. We cannot afford leaders who weaponize division. We cannot afford leaders who mistake a title for an accomplishment. What we need, what we have always needed, are leaders who see themselves as servants of the people, guardians of democracy, stewards of a promise greater than themselves. And that brings us to the question that lies at the heart of this confrontation. If leadership must rest on truth, what happens when lies are allowed to reign? In the next chapter, we will confront the struggle between truth and lies, and why our nation's very survival depends on choosing the former. There is a battle being waged in America. Not with weapons, not on foreign soil, but in the very heart of our democracy. It is the battle between truth and lies. And make no mistake, this battle will decide the future of our nation. Because when truth is silenced, when facts are discarded, when lies become the currency of politics, democracy itself begins to crumble. That is not theory, it is history. And history has left us its warnings carved in stone. Donald Trump has made a career out of lies. He lied about the size of his crowds. He lied about the strength of our economy. He lied about his own failures and called them victories. And each lie was not just a distortion of fact. It was an attack on the very foundation of democracy. Because democracy relies on trust. Trust that leaders will tell the truth. Trust that citizens will be given the facts they need to make decisions. Trust that reality is not whatever the most powerful man says it is. Without that trust, freedom is fragile, justice is compromised, and the nation falls into chaos. We have seen this before. In the 1950s, Senator Joseph McCarthy spread lies that turned neighbor against neighbor, accusing innocent Americans of treason without a shred of evidence. It worked for a time. People were afraid. People were silenced. But eventually, truth rose up. A lawyer named Joseph Welch stood in that hearing room and asked McCarthy the question that ended his reign. Have you no sense of decency, sir? Lies may spread quickly, but truth has a way of standing firm when men and women of courage refuse to bow. And beyond our shores, history shows us even darker lessons. We have seen entire nations consumed by propaganda, where lies were repeated so often that they began to sound like truth, where leaders convinced their people to turn against one another, and where destruction followed. That is why we cannot treat lies as harmless. They are not harmless. Lies poison the well of democracy. Lies corrode the bonds between citizens. Lies leave a people vulnerable to manipulation, vulnerable to fear, vulnerable to those who see power as a prize rather than a trust. And here's the deeper danger. When lies are told often enough, when they are repeated without challenge, they begin to feel normal. People grow numb. They shrug their shoulders and say, that's just how politics works. But the moment we accept lies as politics as usual, we have already surrendered something precious. We have surrendered the very idea that truth matters. And without truth, how do we govern? How do we decide what justice requires? How do we know what sacrifices are worth making? That is why this fight matters. Because democracy cannot survive on lies. It needs light. It needs clarity. It needs citizens who demand honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable. And it needs leaders who understand that their first duty is to the truth, not to their own ambition. Truth is not partisan. Truth is not liberal or conservative. Truth is the ground we all must stand on if we are to build anything that lasts. Now, I know some of you are tired. You're tired of the constant noise, the endless debates, the flood of misinformation. It can feel like shouting into the wind. But I'm telling you, the truth is stubborn. It does not bend to the will of the powerful. It does not disappear because someone tweets something different. It endures because it is carried by people, ordinary people, who are unwilling to let lies have the final word. So tonight, we must ask ourselves, will we live in a nation defined by truth or a nation consumed by lies? That choice is not just about Donald Trump, it is about every one of us. Each time we let a lie go unchallenged, we give it power. Each time we defend the truth, we strengthen the foundation of our democracy. And as we continue this message, we must face another truth. Lies do not just divide us, they leave scars. Lies do not just deceive, they create regret. In the next chapter, we will confront the divisions sown by lies and the heavy cost of regret that follows when a nation allows itself to be torn apart. Division has always been the oldest weapon in the playbook of the powerful. When you cannot lead, you divide. When you cannot inspire, you distract. And when you cannot unite people around hope, you convince them to cling to fear. That is the choice Donald Trump made again and again. He chose to tear this country apart because he believed that broken pieces were easier to control than a united whole. Look around at what those choices have cost us. Families split down the middle, unable to share a table without turning into enemies. Neighbors who used to wave across fences now look at each other with suspicion. Communities that once stood together have been poisoned by a politics of resentment. This is not an accident. It is not just the natural clash of opinion in a democracy. It is the deliberate consequence of a leader who sought power, not by lifting people up, but by turning them against one another. History teaches us how dangerous this path is. In the Civil War, division nearly destroyed us because leaders chose to protect slavery rather than protect the Union. During the Civil Rights era, politicians stoked racial fear instead of embracing justice, and entire generations paid the price for their cowardice. Each time America has flirted with division, we have discovered how fragile our promise truly is, and how much regret follows when leaders fail to do the hard work of unity. Donald Trump may one day look back and regret what he has done. He may regret how he mocked and belittled his fellow citizens. He may regret the lies that pitted Americans against each other. He may regret how his words unleashed violence, suspicion, and hate. But here's the hard truth. Regret, when it comes too late, cannot heal the wounds. It cannot bring back the lives lost, the trust broken, the community shattered. Regret after the damage is done is not redemption. It is confession without repair. But this moment is not just about him. It is about us. Will we allow division to define us? Will we allow regret to be the only legacy we hand to our children? Or will we learn from this painful chapter and choose a different path? Because the truth is, division is not inevitable. It is a choice. And if division is a choice, then unity can be a choice as well. You and I both know that division leaves scars. It weakens us from within, making it harder to solve the real challenges before us. Poverty, inequality, the climate crisis, the fight for justice. When we are at each other's throats, we are too distracted to hold the powerful accountable. When we are consumed by resentment, we lose sight of what binds us together. And when we let ourselves be divided, the only ones who win are those who profit from our chaos. But the deeper tragedy of division is this: it robs us of possibility. Think of what America could achieve if the energy we waste fighting one another was invested in building something greater. Think of the progress waiting to be made in science, in education, in justice, if only we remembered that our destinies are bound together. Division shrinks our imagination. Unity expands it. Division leaves us with regret. Unity gives us hope. And so my message tonight is not only a warning, it is also an invitation. We cannot undo the harm that division has already caused, but we can decide what comes next. We can decide whether regret will be the final word or whether unity will write a new chapter. We can choose to heal, to forgive, to build bridges stronger than the walls that have been erected between us. That choice will not be easy, but it has always been America's calling. Which brings us to the work of unity itself. Because if division is the disease, then unity is the cure. In the next chapter, we will explore what true unity requires. Not as a slogan, not as a dream, but as the hard, necessary work of citizens determined to reclaim the promise of this nation together. Unity is not a slogan. It is not a campaign promise. It is the hard, patient, unglamorous work of binding people together who, on the surface, may have little in common, but who share a deeper bond that runs beneath every difference. The belief that this country belongs to all of us. Unity does not ask us to erase our disagreements, but it does ask us to remember that our disagreements do not make us enemies. Unity does not mean we stop arguing. It means we never forget that. At the end of the argument, we are still one people. Donald Trump thrived by convincing Americans to forget that. He fed the notion that our diversity is a weakness, that compromise is surrender, that empathy is weakness. He treated unity as a threat to his power because he understood something very simple. A divided people can be manipulated, but a united people cannot be controlled. That is why he leaned into division, because unity would have silenced him long before this moment ever could. But let us be clear. Unity is not easy. It demands listening when it would be simpler to shout. It demands patience when anger comes easy. It demands the humility to admit we do not always have all the answers, and the courage to see dignity in those who oppose us. Unity is not passive. It is an act of strength. It is the recognition that the challenges facing this nation, climate change, inequality, corruption, injustice, are too big for any one group to solve alone. Think of the moments in our history when unity made the impossible possible. During World War II, this nation mobilized not as Democrats or Republicans, not as rich or poor, but as Americans committed to defending. During the Civil Rights Movement, black and white citizens marched together, sang together, suffered together, because they understood that justice is indivisible. If one group is denied it, eventually all are. And after September 11, we came together in grief and in courage, proving that even in tragedy, the spirit of unity could carry us through the fire. Now, imagine if we rediscovered that spirit today. Imagine if instead of fueling suspicion, we chose to rebuild trust. Imagine if instead of mocking each other's pain, we chose to bear one another's burdens. Imagine if instead of dividing our communities, we joined hands to strengthen them. That is what unity makes possible. Not perfection, not agreement on everything, but a renewed sense that our fate is shared. Trump's legacy of division has left us scarred. But scars are not the end of the story. They are proof that we survived. They are proof that healing is possible. But healing requires more than time. It requires will. And the will to heal must begin with each of us. No president, no leader, no law alone can mend what has been broken. Unity begins in our homes, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, wherever we decide that we will see each other as fellow Americans first. And here is the truth.
Unity is not weakness. It is not naive.
It is the most powerful weapon we have. Division shrinks our future, but unity multiplies it. Division leaves us smaller, weaker, afraid. Unity makes us bigger, stronger, hopeful. When we are united, there is no storm we cannot weather, no challenge we cannot face, no promise we cannot fulfill. So tonight, I call on you to choose unity, not as a gift to any one leader, not as a gesture of politeness, but as a responsibility to the generations yet to come. Because the future of America will not be built by tearing one another down, but by lifting one another up. It will not be built by fighting each other, but by standing together. That is the calling of unity, and it is one we cannot afford to ignore. And yet, unity alone is not enough, because unity requires courage, the courage to confront those who abuse power, the courage to stand against those who mistake fear for strength. In the next chapter, we will face that test head-on and ask what it truly means to show courage in the face of power. Power has a way of testing the soul of a man. It whispers that you are untouchable, that you are above accountability, that the rules do not apply to you. And when that temptation is left unchecked, it corrodes everything it touches: institutions, communities, even the very fabric of democracy. That is the danger we faced in Donald Trump's presidency. He wielded power not as a trust to be honored, but as a weapon to be used against his critics, his rivals, and too often, his own people. But courage, true courage, requires something far greater. It requires standing firm when the easy path is to bend. It requires speaking truth when silence would be safer. It requires standing up not only to your enemies, but sometimes even to your friends when they have lost their way. Courage in the face of power means remembering that public office is not about serving yourself. It is about serving the people who place their faith in you. And that faith is sacred. For 4 years, we saw what happens when power goes unchecked. We saw children separated from their parents at the border, treated not as human beings, but as political leverage. We saw citizens attacked for protesting injustice, while those in power pretended their voices did not matter. We saw a president more eager to bully than to lead, more eager to protect his pride than to protect the Constitution. That is not courage. That is cowardice dressed in arrogance. History, however, shows us a different path. It shows us leaders who had the courage to confront power, even when it meant sacrificing their own comfort, their own safety, even their own lives. Think of the marchers in Selma, who faced bought-in tear gas not with violence, but with dignity, because they knew that courage is stronger than brutality. Think of George Washington, who at the height of his power laid it down, refusing a crown, proving that America would be built not on kings, but on citizens. Think of every whistleblower, every journalist, every citizen who risked everything to speak the truth when lies were easier. That is what courage looks like in the face of power. And let us not forget, courage is not only demanded of those at the top, it is demanded of us too. It is demanded of the voter who stands in line for hours because they believe their voice matters. It is demanded of the parent who teaches their child to respect truth when the world around them is drowning in lies. It is demanded of every citizen who refuses to be intimidated into silence, who understands that democracy does not survive on the courage of a few, but on the courage of many. Donald Trump thought power meant never having to answer for his choices. He thought courage was measured by how fiercely you attack your opponents. But courage is not about tearing others down. It is about lifting the nation higher, even when it costs you something. Courage is not the volume of your voice. It is the steadiness of your convictions. It is not in the swagger of the powerful, but in the resilience of those who refuse to be broken. So the question before us is this: will we allow fear to define our politics, or will we choose courage? Will we accept leaders who bully and belittle, or will we demand leaders who serve and sacrifice? The test of our time is not whether we can accumulate power, but whether we can restrain it, guide it, and use it for the common good. That is the challenge every generation must face, and ours is no different. Tonight, I call on each of you to reclaim the courage that this moment demands. Do not look to someone else to do it for you. Do not wait for another voice to rise. Let it be you. Let it be us. Because when ordinary people choose courage, no amount of power can stand against them. And yet, courage is not just about resisting what is wrong. It is about protecting what is right. It is about defending the legacy we have inherited, the story of America itself. In the next chapter, we will confront that legacy, what it means, how it has been threatened, and why we cannot allow it to be diminished by selfishness or corruption.